Hey everybody. Little update. I got to visit with my dad today as he was getting his first treatment. I was able to be there for that. Um, his spirits are up. He was joking with us, the family, and the nurses, and signs are good. Um, it was a very good visit. Greatly appreciated it. Shout out to my sister's fiance. Again, I thanked him profusely, but I can't thank him enough. For being the one that drive us up there. Um, I really do appreciate that. I know that was, a lot. It really was. But he was a trooper for us, so thank you. Um, it was a good time. Despite the situation, it was. We actually got to enjoy, the company a little bit. Granted, there were moments of tension here and there, but once things settled in, it definitely got a lot better. So I'm very thankful for that, and I pray that it's going to continue that way. And since that visit, I've been doing quite a bit of reflecting uh, on myself on a few things, um, and in general, overall, it's about growth. You know, one of the things I thought about was if this had happened 6 months ago, this would have probably been a whole different ball game. You know, because if I look back 6 months ago, I was around the wrong crowd, and I was in that wrong headspace. I was still in people pleaser mode, and I was letting go of myself, to satisfy everybody else. I was around people that I couldn't depend on, that I couldn't, you know. I faced my darkest time alone. And that was the type of friends I had. And then I look at now, if I had stayed in that relationship, I wouldn't have the church to follow in right now. Being in that relationship kept me away from church. And that has been, a huge blessing, you know. Um, being, in the right crowd has really done wonders, for me on this journey. And I'm very grateful for it. I really have no regrets. I don't, you know. I know I let it get stuck with my mind, and honestly, it's more the audacity. I can't. I'm letting it go though, because I'm trying. It's getting easier again, because now I was able to, step forward as myself today. And it's been a long time since I've been able to do that, especially out in public. Um, I am free of the chains that used to hold me back. You know, and that's not anything new. I was always, I had great customer service mode. I could deal with anybody, no matter how. I was always the guy. When we got the unruly customers, I was always the go-to guy. Like, hey, Joe, could you take care of this one? And that was even before I had been through the experiences to heal the way I have now. God, now, Jesus, it's going to be amazing. Um, can't wait to test that one out. but I've always been, the type of person that can handle the most difficult in the space. Um, and I'm getting back to that, except again, more enhanced now. And I like it. You know, as I've been reflecting on the growth, on how much I've changed over just the past few months alone, let alone the last 5 years. Um, it really is amazing. And I owe all that to God. To finally making the right choices and taking the right steps and getting into my purpose. You know, I'm stepping more into what God built me for, what I was designed for, and it's made a vast improvement in my life. Again, I have no regrets. It's funny. It wasn't that long ago I was talking about that peace that passes understanding, and I was reflecting on that today, and it's like, again, if this was 6 months ago, I would be freaking out right now. I would have been absolutely crushed over the relationship, and I would be thinking, hey, I need that person, and this is a hard time, and I wouldn't be showing up right for the family, and it's a whole cascade domino effect. And now it's like, no, they left me alone long enough. Again, I went through the worst things by myself. Hell, they caused one of the worst things I went through. And while they were out having a great time, I was, having to pick up my pieces and put myself back together. And I really like the new me a lot more because I do not accept abuse anymore. Now I see it quick, and you want to step that way? That's great. I'm going to step out your way. Nope. And again, I'm so used to facing the hard parts alone. This is the first time in a long time I'm facing a difficult trial, and my instinct is not to reach out to somebody. It is to, get into the Word. It is to be in fellowship. It is to have faith. That's one of those things that it really is ironic, because no matter how bad life has gotten, again, looking back, hindsight is 2020. But no matter how bad life got, I never gave all the way up. I came close, like dangerously close, a couple times, but I never made it. Something always stepped in. Well, I mean, obviously it was God, but I mean in different ways, you know. And even though, I say one of my faults is I keep walking away from my faith, that's not entirely true, because it's that faith that gave me that I can't quit, I can't give up, you know? Hell, at a second heart attack, I actually got offered an out. I did. I said, no, I'll go back. I'll do it. And it took the third heart attack to get my ass in gear. But yeah. For a while, I felt like I was regretting that decision. And that's just, inaccurate. I'm very glad I made that decision. I can't say I'm completely stoked with where my life is right now. I'm not going to put up that front, but I am handling it a lot better than the old me would have. I don't need the kind of validation that I used to. I don't need that person to kind of lean on. Like I have to be my own. And it's been that way for a long time, and I refused to see it from that perspective. I kept putting on those rose colored glasses instead of the lens of truth, and I just kept letting the same cycle repeat. And instead of strengthening me, it was tearing me down. And I had to finally see that and break myself free. And it really does amaze me. Like, the revelations of the last few months alone. Again, the growth. The way I react slightly differently. Granted, I'm a little testier. I've noticed that. I am. But it's that firmness, because I got so used to being walked. Again, I have been taught by just about everybody in my life. Ironically, I was having this conversation earlier this morning via text. You know, the softer I am, the softer my approach, the less satisfied I am with results. The more I'm ignored. The more I'm taken for granted. Whereas if I approach it like I'm in full asshole mode, then I get results very quickly. And again, that's all aspects of my life. You know? And it's a shame because that's not the person I want to be. I want to be the gentleman, the one that, I mean, that's how it was originally, set to be. That's how I chose to be. But the world says, no, we can't have that. But I still have that. I refuse to give up. So I'm going to be me. I might have to protect me a little bit more, get some better tactics, but that's about it. That's about the only change. And the rest is new and improved. It was interesting, the visit we were having today, and the reflection of, yes, my dad is keeping his spirits up, but he was also being very grounded and realistic, and he was making sure that we knew, the family knew his wishes on certain things or certain information we would need to know if the worst happened. And that's a good sign because again, we were still able to have that levity, that joking, that laughing together. But there was also that grounded sense of this is the reality. Like, you know a, the news I was given is, if he hadn't gone in for treatment when he did, he would have lasted about 2 weeks, they said. So it was that, far along that, you know, But they're not playing around. I'll tell you what, them folks at Cooper, oh, they're great. I love them. You know, and we were ruminating on that. Everybody in that room today has spent extended periods of time in that hospital. The only one not as a patient was my sister, but it was her son that was the patient. So she was there as, his mother, his guardian. So she was there like a week. I was in there for the first heart attack. And the other person visiting was there, had been there multiple times for heart. Like he actually had open heart, on him. And then, of course, my dad was in there now. Well, he had been in there previously, but he was back again now for oncology. And, we were reflecting on that. Like, we all know he is in a good place. Like, we know he is getting top-notch care. And I'm thankful for that. And again, there's that promise, that faith. That, yeah, it might be dark times, but it could also be a lot worse. Like there's a lot of blessings to be appreciative for, despite the situation. And that, I was talking the other day about the test of faith, and that really is, can you keep your faith, your gratitude to God when the circumstances are not good. Look at the story of Job. Lost everything. Still kept his faith. And I am learning. God has proven to me over and over again. He is not abandoning me. He is not giving up on me. He is not letting me quit. And not because I have to, not because I have free will. It's just, and that's why he knows my will is the same. I do want to succeed. Despite everything, I do not look like what I've been through, A lot of people wouldn't believe half my stories. And, think they were true because look how I am. Look how I treat others. Most people that go through those things, they either harden their heart and they get nasty, or they get very hurt and they withdraw. They're very timid and scared. And I am neither. And it's those events that you have to go through. Again, not ideal scenarios, but that show you what you're really made of. What you're capable of when you have that humility, when you turn yourself over to God. God will show you what you're built for. So yeah, reflect on that sometime. If you've been following things so far, it's not good to look back in rumination to want to go back, but it is okay to look back just to see how far you've come. To know what you've left behind. Don't be like Lot's wife and look back in yearning like I want to go back. Not like that. But if you want to, look back and look at the footprints and see, where Jesus has carried you, where God has walked beside you. That's good to do from time to time. When I say when God has walked beside, I mean like on a personal level, because God is always with us. But when you have that personal relationship, and that's what it's all about, you know? That's important. I'm just thankful for a lot of things right now, and I know I have no reason or right to, according to some, because of the situation. There's a lot of negative things in my life right now, but for what positive there is, it outweighs it, and I can recognize that now. That is one of the huge differences from months ago. I am able to be more appreciative. I am able to find the things to appreciate. No matter how dark it gets, there is always a light. Even if it has to come, you know, from the Spirit, within, that indwelling Holy Spirit. Sometimes that's the only light you're going to find. But if you have that relationship, that light will be bright. That'll be more than enough. And I can speak that from experience. But you got to be open. And you have to be authentic. It has to be genuine. But when you genuinely turn yourself over, oh, it changes everything. It's so worth it. For a world that looks at humility as a weakness, and that's why, because they don't want people to be humble. Because if more people were humble, more people would understand. That's where true power lies. When you can maintain control of your, thoughts and actions, your reactions, that's real power. When you are so aware of yourself and the things around you, that's all you see is the raw truth, the reality. Sometimes that feels like a curse. You see things you don't want to see, but again, the reality of it is it's a gift. And again, it's all about perspective and perception. Lean not on thy own understanding, but get in the Word. Open yourself to the Holy Spirit. Walk the walk. Sometimes you'll have to be carried, and that's okay. He actually takes pleasure in that. Not in the fact that you're, broken that way, but in the fact that he can carry you and see you through it. That's real love. Just got to be willing to accept it. Can't close yourself off to it. And unfortunately, too many people in this world do. You know, I had a frightening revelation today. You know, because again, I don't get out much, but today I was in a lot of public. And I was, you know, again, I was reflecting on the crowd I was around before, and I realized there is a lot of darkness in the world. A lot of people that just want to turn their back on anything that brings light. You know, it's bad out there. But there's always hope. I mean, the victory's already been claimed. I mean, that's the greatest thing, part of the whole thing. But you only understand that if you get into the faith. You know, if you study the Word, you will get that understanding. And it will help you. It'll guide you, carry you through the hard times. So, in rumination, yes, reflection of looking back at the growth. Every once in a while, take inventory, take stock. You know, how much have you built on? How much better are you now than you were, you know, a while back, or when you first started, or, you know, when you first decided there needed to be change. All right, so yeah, keep that in mind. Keep taking care of yourself. As you're able, help others. I'll see you in the next one.